Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today it is Coach Natalie and I talking through when should you change exercise order versus just doing a substitute movement. And hopefully by the time I publish this, I have a better title than that, but that's what we're working with for now. This is a super common question though. If you train in a commercial gym, it's very common for your training flow to be interrupted by some just ingrates using the equipment that
Rude
you need,
people.
awful people using the
Selfish.
equipment that you need. You're supposed to be doing your hack squat now, and they're on the hack squat. So, very commonly, clients ask us, what do we do next? So, we're kind of working through when shouldn't you change movements, how to go about determining what's the best route there. If you are swapping movements, what do we look for to determine the most ideal swap? And really just giving you kind of a framework to think through when going about this. Natalie, before we get into that, anything new going on with you this week?
Yes, I am going to the Arnold this weekend in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm really
Let's
excited.
go.
Yeah. So I'm
How far is Columbus from you?
like a 5 or so hour drive. And the fact that it's drivable just makes it like super easy. So I'm leaving tomorrow, which is Friday, which means that I will get there for some of the expo.
Okay.
So I'm doing the expo Friday and Saturday, and also have tickets to the finals Friday night, Saturday night. So that's going to be really fun, and I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, the Arnold like doesn't have the figure category, which is like my category for bodybuilding, which is confusing and weird and disappointing. But I still hear that the Arnold is like a really good time, and a lot of people will say like it's even more fun than going to the Olympia, even though the Olympia does have figure. So in any case, I'm looking forward to it. Because I'm going to be there with some friends, so it'll be good networking, good connecting. It'll get me really hyped up for the season. Always good to like see that level of athlete. Maybe I'll run into like Sebum because I think he's around.
Who?
There are a
Oh,
lot of big
C-bomb.
personalities.
Oh
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, not of course he's not competing or anything, but there are just a lot of personalities that'll just be there. So I think it'll be a really good time. And my friend and I are going to go to dinner at Ted's Montana Grill. Do you have one of those? Do you know what that is? Oh,
No.
it's like it's a chain, but it's like really good, and they have really good bison burgers.
Okay.
And
Fitting name, I
anyways,
guess.
I know I haven't actually. The last time I went to Ted's was like after my photo shoot in like 2022. And it's
That's where
actually
you
like
went?
yes, because I really wanted a bison burger with some onion rings and French fries. And honestly, you could do a lot worse than like a bison burger. So, um, yeah, so I'm really excited because I've been meaning to go back for a very long time, and so we're going both nights.
Incredible. I would
Yeah.
dive into a pile of onion rings right now for sure.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot that you're dieting.
Oh, it's quite all right. I'm not suffering or anything. At
Yeah.
all times, I love onion rings. It's been a
Oh,
while.
they're so good, and
Big
actually,
fr-
they're quite good there. So,
big frings guy, honestly. French fries and onion rings together.
well, that's you can do
Runza,
half and half there, and then there's the
it's the best.
off-menu sweet potato fries. Yeah.
Do you know what Runza is?
Uh-uh.
It's pretty exclusive to like Nebraska, actually. I feel like it's some one of the weird little things you would love.
Oh,
It's like
probably.
this. It's like a fast food, but it's so good. It's
Oh,
hard. It's like what a beer rock is.
no.
You don't know what a runza or a beer rock is.
Nope.
Huh, I'll have to make some and
Great.
send them to you.
Next
Don't.
team retreat, Nebraska.
Yeah. Okay. Hard to explain then. It's like a German thing, I think. Anyways, moving on from that. That'll be cool for the Arnold's incredible. Anything
Yeah.
else your training and nutrition personally, except for eating bison burgers going on there you want to update us on?
No, I'm not even gonna take a free meal or anything because honestly, like I can so easily fit this into my macros and calories, which
I eat like half a bison a day.
yeah, basically. Yeah, my protein is quite high at this point. So no, training is feeling really good. I feel like all of the, people probably know that I've been dealing with like a niggly shoulder for a while now. And I have like a couple of my training days are like upper body are like the same. Like I do a lot of the exact same things twice a week, and like I don't care because it's working for me. But I feel like it's taken me since like August or so to now. It's like a lot of my training feedback from Nick, who helps me with my movement on like on the just the movement function side of things. Like I'm finally in that groove where like most things I send him now, he's like, "Yep, yep,
Oh yeah.
like, let's go heavier, let's go heavier." And that's not to say that things were like a total disaster up until this point, but it's just like there were just so many like little things, and you're also talking about like breaking down old movement patterns, you know, and like again, like when you break any kind of pattern, like you don't break patterns, you replace them, and that takes time. And just like a lot of reinforcement and also a lot of trial and error, you know, like, okay, let's try this. And maybe it didn't work. So then we had to go back to the drawing board. But it just finally feels like I'm in that sweet spot where like everything's just like coming together on the training side of things. And I feel like on the nutrition side of things, like things are going well. I've been incorporating more free meals, like never more than one a week. But before, like, I just wouldn't take free meals because, like, just couldn't be bothered. Like, it didn't really matter. But I know that at some point I likely have, like, a very hard diet coming up. So, you know, it's kind of like, okay, let's make some really intentional choices. It's not Last Supper mentality, but it's more so like, I just want to be able to do things that I know I won't be able to do for a little while. Like, you know, go enjoy a meal with my parents and not bring my own food, which honestly I usually do year round. So it's like in the last like month and a half, I'd say, you know, I've done that less, and it's actually it's been really nice, and I do think it's really good to dust off those skills and make sure, especially if you know you have a diet coming up. Again, not a Last Supper mentality, but just a like, I want my relationship with food to be like in the best place possible because like, you know, fast forward 8 months from now, if there's like a contest prep or something like that, you know, that those things can be very draining on all aspects of like, you know, relationship with food, relationship with others. So
Oh yeah.
just trying to be extra mindful, I guess.
No, I think that's a really good way to approach it. And it's cool you're being intentional about that. Who knows how much bison you'll get to eat once you're on prep, so better get it in now.
Well, actually, the entire bison. It is a good lean choice for those of you out there looking
Yeah,
at it.
bison is solid. I can't say I've ever actually eaten bison, but I have looked at the macros.
I believe it's usually like when you look at it in the store, I believe like a ground bison, I believe it's usually like 90/10.
Oh, that's pretty solid.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just like when you see it on a menu, like either like a bison steak, which to be honest, you really don't. You know what? I had a bison steak at the team retreat in Bentonville, I believe. But you rarely,
Really?
yeah. Now that we're talking about it, because you rarely see it on a menu. Maybe you'll see it in like burger form, but that's what's cool about this place, Ted's Montana, is that they actually have like this huge burger menu, and you can opt for beef or bison. So it's just, and they also have like a bison steak and like bison nachos, and like it's just not something you come across often, which I guess for people like us is like just feels so exciting.
Yeah,
For like
but bison hate to see Ted Montana coming, they say. All right, let's get into changing exercise order versus just doing a substitute movement. If the piece of equipment you need in your program next is unavailable. So when we're looking at our order of operations here, as always, just jump in wherever. First, what I would be asking personally is this a key movement for your goals, right? So you should probably know, hey, these are my more priority muscle groups. For example, if I'm trying to build my glutes, my RDLs, my split squats, things of that nature are going to be much more of a priority. If I don't care about my pecs, then my chest press isn't going to be a bigger priority. Next, I'm going to be looking at, does it have a higher skill component, or is the stimulus easy to replicate? Going to be very important that, again, when we're swapping movements, even if we're looking at like for like even in between two leg presses, the stimulus you can get can be drastically different. It is pretty crazy, actually. I would say like leg presses are one of the pieces of equipment, actually, where there's, not to make this about leg presses too much, but there's a ton of variability from like leg press to leg press with how they're set up. Hack squats, similar, but to like a lesser degree. Like pendulum squats, very similar. I would say there's still like more nuances, but Point of all that being, if it's like, okay, there's this leg press I love, and then this one that feels absolutely terrible, I don't get anywhere near the range of motion I do on the other one. Okay, we might not be able to get the same stimulus there. So on the other side of that, when we're talking about skill, again, if there's a higher skill component, similarly, this is going to be harder to replicate. Thus, making a substitute here rarely gives us the same stimulus. And that's the biggest thing we're chasing here is like, if this is a key movement for your goals, yes, again, like glutes are a top priority. This is one of our glute movements. Is it a high skill movement? If so, like a high skill movement example would be like a barbell back squat, right? Takes a while for us to get good at it. Our Romanian deadlifts are going to be pretty skill heavy as well, things of that nature. Or like, give me an example of a low skill movement you can think of. A lateral raise.
Like leg curl.
Leg curl, that's a really good example, yeah. Leg curl, lateral raise, something of that sort, pretty low skill. A lot easier to replicate with similar equipment given there's not like a huge variety or a huge deviation in the setup. Or like, let's say a cable lateral raise.
Yeah.
If you're not on the same cable stack as you normally are, but there's another cable stack you can use, okay, like we don't need to be too worried about that. Like
I was gonna say maybe leg curl wasn't the best choice because like there are a lot of substitutions for like, okay, let's do this instead. But yeah, I think lateral raise is a better example there.
Right, we're going from like one cable to another, right? Yeah. Perfectly fine with that.
Which I still hate, by the way.
I do too, honestly. But
it makes me so angry when I have to change my training. Anyways.
Especially, again, if this is a movement you're focusing on progressing for a priority body part, we're really going to want to try to avoid substituting if at all possible. So instead, I guess before we get into that, like what I would do instead, is there anything else you want to add to what I just chatted through?
There is. I think there's a little bit of foundation we can lay too. Understand that if you are a client of ours, we have put thought and intention into your programming. So it's not a random assortment of things. Even though like you might think it is, it's not. There's thought behind like why it's in the order that it's in. And this can be due to so many reasons. It could be literally due to like prioritization, like, hey, this is a really big focus for us, so we want it earlier in your program so we can load it up. Or maybe it's like, hey, this is first because this is, we've got a really tricky movement pattern for you coming up. And so we want to make sure that you, especially like your specific body is like primed for this movement. Right. So a great example of this is like I will, with many of my clients, put something like a leg curl ahead of like a hack squat or a pendulum or something like that, like warm up knee flexion there. It's right. Not because like the seated leg curl is your A series primary movement. It's really just like I'm trying to like prime you as best as possible for max performance and output on that pendulum or something like that, or maybe there's an injury history that we've taken into account. Or, right. Maybe, we're working through some like shoulder function problems. And so we've like specifically, put a couple things first. So my whole point is understand that, especially if you're a client of ours, or if you're working with a coach who is very knowledgeable, this is not a random order. So best case scenario, your program is designed for you to execute in this order. So the best case scenario is you can wait like 5 minutes for the machine to free up or something. However, where we're coming from with this podcast is we understand that is not always feasible.
Right.
A lot of our early morning gym goers, it's like y'all are already waking up at 4 a.m. to get into the gym by 4:30 because you got to like get on the road to commute to work. Like we understand that that's not always realistic. If it is realistic, please execute your program in the order in which it is written.
Yeah, no, that's a really good caveat there. That'd be ideal. I would say, like for me, even there's times where hey, I'll just chill here, wait, stare this person down. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But
you have to pace in front of them.
That's the best way to approach it. But then there are times where, hey, no, I just need to like move on to something else, come back to this. So let's work through again. If we do need to change, if we don't have the luxury of the time to wait around, what do we do? Okay, so first option would be is working in feasible first just ask, hey, can I work in with you? And you talked about, did touch on this a couple weeks ago, right? If it's like, hey, this person's using 5 plates per side per their hack squat, I'm using 1. Okay, that might not necessarily be as feasible if there's like a huge disparity. If it's a pin loaded machine, it's pretty rare, I think, that there shouldn't be like a reason that you could work in. Don't be afraid to ask either.
Yeah, or even like a pendulum, because like a pendulum's not the
Right.
same loading as like a leg press.
Right.
Like even people who are really, really strong are not going to have like 6 plates on the pendulum, whereas you have 1.
Right.
So changing out those plates isn't that annoying. Or like, again, cables are a popular one too. It's like it's pin loaded. It's not that much weight. Like people have to rest anyways.
Right.
So when it comes to gym etiquette, the correct answer when someone asks if they can work in is yes, of course. Even though like none of us want to share, like, if we had our way. If the person says no, they're wrong and they're a dick. And then we can move on to some of these other options, but I like this option the best, honestly, because you can still preserve your training program as written.
Absolutely. No, I think that's ideal. And again, especially like pin loaded stuff, really shouldn't be a big deal. Like pin loaded upper body stuff, especially, very easy to just hop in there. Now, that said, if that's not realistic, then your first and best option, in my opinion, is going to be to go to your next movement for a non-competing body part that won't hurt your performance when you come back to said movement. And this will allow you to keep gauging your progress from week to week. So, as an example here, last week when I wrote this, I was waiting for the hack squat, which is crazy because there's 2 of the same hack squat at our gym now, actually, and they were both taken. I, of course, there's only one that I use, though, because it's, I don't know.
He has 2 of the exact same Atlantis?
Yeah, 2 of the Atlantis Pro.
That's funny. That's great, though.
It is. But, hey, that was taken. I couldn't use that. So, next, I had, like, a leg extension. Okay, I know that will have it. No, I had leg press next. Okay, I know if I do my leg press before my hack squat, I'm going to get way more reps on my leg press than normal. I'm going to do way less reps on my hack squat than normal. Very much working the same tissue. So I'm going to skip ahead to my seated leg curl next. That, as you mentioned, like, hey, we could argue that might even help. Like, if anything else, like we're training through knee flexion, which I already had like warmed up for, but probably, again, we're not training the same muscle group. And it's not like okay, it's not the same as, like, let's say I was going to do a Romanian deadlift and I did like I hopped on the lower back machine. I don't know why I've never programmed the lower back machine in my life, but hypothetically, right, we want to make sure that whatever movement we're doing next, ideally, is not going to really subtract from our performance here. Mm-hmm. So that would be our most ideal option. So in that case, I did my leg curls, still waiting for the hack squat. I did my calf raises. Again, probably not going to compete a whole lot. And then I was good to go. So got those done and came back. Still performed very well on the hack squat. Anything else you would add there?
I'd say, like, I do have the luxury of working from home and being very close to my gym. So I can wait 5 minutes usually. But I use the calf raise all the time. So like if I get stuck on something, because I'm waiting for a machine to open up, like dude has like 5 sets or whatever he's doing. A lot of times, like I'll get in like my calf work. That's like a very easy, like non-competing thing to do. And then I'll also say, because sometimes it depends on the day, but if I do have the time, and it depends on the layout of the gym, like the layout of my gym, like upper body is kind of near the treadmills. A lot of times, like if a treadmill's free, like I'll hop on there and get in like some steps as I like just stare the person down on the machine that I need. And the second that person's off, like I'm off that treadmill to claim my spot. But anyways, to your whole point here, yes, something like calves would be a great one. Like that's not going to affect your performance on your hack squat.
Absolutely. No, that's perfect. Next up, second option. Can you do a secondary movement for this body part and come back to it? So let's say, again, glutes were a priority and we were doing a rear foot elevated split squat and then we were going into a glute bridge, or we were training quads, we were doing a hack squat and a leg extension. We could next look to, okay, should I change the order of these movements? Again, this is going to impact our performance. more so than if you went to a non-competing body part. But if that's not feasible, then we're looking to, okay, like maybe I'm doing my glute bridge before the rear foot elevated split squat. Now, the thing to understand here is the less stable the second movement we do here is, the more this typically hurts performance and potentially your execution. So for example, if I had to do my leg extension before my hack squat, I anecdotally wouldn't see as much. The hack squat's very stable. I wouldn't see as much of a negative outcome on my hack squat performance, flipping the order of those as if it was like a leg extension to a barbell back squat, for example. But the thing to understand here still is, and it's like ultimately even in that case, is it that big of a deal? I would say not necessarily, but it will still hurt your performance a bit on that, like whatever that compound movement is. We're basically talking compound movement, isolation movement. It will hurt their performance a bit on that compound movement likely. Muscle will be more fatigued, quads, glutes, whatever it is, than they would be prior. But I mean, ultimately, as long as you hit your RIR targets, we'll still get an effective training stimulus. It's not like because you didn't match reps from last week, we didn't make progress here. It's still an effective training stimulus. Again, we just changed the order of our movements. Anything else you would add on that front?
Yeah, you're still sending the signal to your muscles too, which is the important thing.
Next up, third option would be to swap for a similar movement. So here, again, this is our last option here. Going to be less ideal than the other two, but in a pinch, we might need to from time to time. So here, for muscle groups that are way down the priority list, this isn't a big deal. Again, if we're doing a dumbbell incline chest press instead of a Smith machine chest press for a client who doesn't care about their pecs at all, I'm not really that concerned with it, honestly. If you're like a client who pecs are one of our top priorities, okay, that's a lot more of a concern. Here, similarly, movements that are largely just have you moving at a single joint, or like the less joints we have working here, typically the easier they're going to be to replicate, especially if you're able to use similar equipment. So I would say like they're going to be slightly different, but even going from like a Smith machine glute bridge to a barbell glute bridge, right? We're still like essentially hip thrusting a bar. It will feel a little bit different still, but we'll be proficient enough at the movement that we should be able to get a pretty solid stimulus from the barbell glute bridge, just like the Smith machine glute bridge. Even I would say like it's more of a pain to set up, but going from like a hip drive, a glute drive machine to like really any of our other like hip thrust variations, not a huge ordeal there. But again, for priority muscle groups, I would typically only choose this if the only alternative is skipping the movement. Anything else you want to add before we talk through what to consider when swapping movements?
No, but I'll say something like that, like a if you have a glute drive or a Smith machine glute bridge, and you're like, let me just like set up this barbell. I mean, would setting up the barbell take more or less time than like waiting for the machine? I don't know. Like, I'm gonna throw.
I would do a lot to avoid having to set up a
exactly.
Thrust, honestly.
I think I should also add the disclaimer that I think when it comes to this stuff, I am like the laziest person ever. That's me. Some of you guys probably are willing to do a little bit more than I am, but I'll just like sit my ass down and wait it out personally.
No, truly, loading out the barbell for a hip thrust
or
is
anything
the worst. Yeah, I mean like RDLs.
Nope.
I work from the
Also
rack,
no.
but pulling from the rack, like I don't typically recommend people go from the floor either.
Right.
Not a big deal. Some more work than I'd like, honestly, but okay. So let's talk through what to consider when swapping movements. So first, we're going to look to match the movement pattern. So hey, basically, how are we moving through space here? Is it I am primarily getting a lot of deflection, I'm driving my knees forward over my toes, and my torso is staying pretty upright? Is this a hinge? Am I pulling from overhead? Am I pulling horizontally? So first, just look to match the movement pattern, right? And not just like this is a squat, but is it, hey, I'm driving my knees way forward over my toes, or it's a little bit more of a hip dominant squat. Next, I would look to, is the movement hard in the same place? So, I mean, technically like a glute bridge and a Romanian deadlift are both hinges, but they're much different stimulus, right? Our glute bridge is going to be hardest in the short position. Our RDL is going to be very easy there and hard in the lengthened position. So if you were like, okay, I can't for some reason do a glute bridge, I'm going to do an RDL instead, that's much different. Maybe, okay, maybe I'm going to do a 45-degree hip extension then. If that's we're like pretty far down the list of substitutes for a glute bridge, I don't think that we would get there, but hopefully y'all understand the point that I'm making. So again, are they hard in the same place? And then finally, do they have similar levels of stability? Which will again make a big difference on the stimulus. So for example, if you are doing a rear foot elevated split squat on the Smith machine, and we're looking at, okay, I can't get on the Smith machine. What should I do? Okay, your mind would typically probably first go to, I should do a dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat. But there, unless we're like well trained in that as well, it's a lot more likely that stability is going to be more of a limiting factor for you. So in that instance, actually doing like a single leg leg press might be more like for like substitute. So typically when you're looking for substitutions here, I would look to swap for a movement that provides the same or more stability if the goal of the movement is hypertrophy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I like that take a lot, but I'll also add a caveat that, like, guys, if you're someone that does do a Smith machine rear foot elevated split squat, as so many of our clients do, and you've before like subbed in a dumbbell Bulgarian split squat, you're fine. Like, you're fine.
That is also true. Yes, this isn't the end of
Like,
the world.
yeah, like we love nerding out about this stuff and like everything that we've mentioned today, like the whys and the what we would do and best case scenario and optimality. We love it, but like none of this is to cause anyone to like overthink or like second guess or feel like oh my god, I didn't do that. I'm gonna get a worse result from that day or something like that. Like no, of course not.
Yeah.
We're just like trying to provide some education and insight around like why we would do what we would do.
That's a really good point though, because I would say theoretically, like what I just said is most optimal, but in application, like will be quite frequent where a client might need to substitute that, and it is, hey, we're just trying to get you skilled at the movement pattern, and like, hey, if that's the goal, then our dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat will allow us to better learn the mechanics of the pattern more than like our leg press might. And just in general, yes, it's not a huge deal. It is really, again, just looking at might be more optimal. I think that honestly, maybe the rear foot elevated split squat isn't even a very good example to use for that one, because I feel like now that's one I would make a lot more subs. I would like. Anyways, I think you understand where I'm coming from there.
Well, I think the whole point here is that you have options.
Right.
And I just, I feel like I've been having a lot of conversations with clients lately where I feel like there's a lot of like fear of like screwing something up. Or like I'm not like if I don't do this like perfectly, I'm just not gonna get the best result or a great result. And like that's just not true.
That is very true. That's
So I
not
think
true.
that's just
It's very
where,
true
like,
that that's not true.
that's just like where my mind is right now. So it's like because it's on my mind, like I'm kind of like viewing everything through this lens, and I'm like, I don't want people to think that they're gonna like completely tank their results or not get a good stimulus. Like that's not the case.
No, that's a very good point. I was talking to a client on Monday, and I had for some of his bicep work, we had tweaked his execution, and he was like, I feel like I just wasted that session now. I was like, no, not at all. Like, I basically I had him change his elbow position slightly for a hammer curl movement. It's like, no, we still like we were again like a 9 out of 10 there. Basically, it was just a little bit more bicep, a little bit less brachialis, a little bit more balance, and like making this slightly more brachialis bias, which I'm aiming for here. But it's such like a subtle difference that we're getting here. And again, it's same thing with like form feedback when I have this conversation a lot as well, where if it's like, hey, every week we're working on things in our training to improve. It's easy to like, I still haven't gotten it right. I'm not gonna make progress until I get it right. And that's not the case, right? Again, it is a lot of times we're just trying to take this from like an 8 or 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10 as consistently as we can. The more points that we can get on the board, the better. But we could still make a ton of progress. A lot of times, like your clients are already executing very well. And even for us, I know both of us still, like you with Nick, me with Kyle, my coach, like it's every week there's still so many little things we can tweak. Mm-hmm. That's part of the fun of this. Like my RDL, I feel like every week for as long as I can remember, I've been like, I can still improve this. I can still improve this. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I haven't made any progress or built any muscle from it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you haven't done any work up until this point. Like everything that you did up until now doesn't count. Like that's not how it works.
100%. Anything else to add before we wrap this up then?
Short and sweet.
When can the people expect season 1 of Lots to Love?
I don't think we got enough votes for that.
There were a lot of people who said they wanted to be a contestant.
There were also 3 people that voted no, at least.
They were all, literally the 3 no votes were all your different accounts. Absurd. Those were the only 3 people who voted no.
I need more accounts.
All right. Well, if you would like to be a contestant on Lots to Love, please feel free to shoot either of us a DM. Submit your application. We need a headshot in there. And let us know how much you bench press alongside that. What would be your what would be your cutoff? What would be like your cutoff for like below this point you bench less than an X amount, you're not a contender?
Ooh, I think we'd probably have to go like lat spread measurement, like wingspan.
How many plates on the Nautilus pull down, single arm, do we have to hit to be a contender?
At least 4.
I'd say at least 3.
I'm going 4.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I use like 2+ change. So.
Touche. All right. Well, you're here first. Coming at you soon. All right, team. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. If you enjoy the show, leave us a 5-star rating and review. If you would like to apply for coaching, click the link in the show notes, and we will catch you guys next time.